Heyo, Jang here from UltimateRC.com with a look at the Granite. This is a two-wheel drive electric monster truck from ARRMA-RC. It comes pre-assembled, ready to run with everything except batteries, and costs about $220. I've previously reviewed the Raider, which is a desert buggy, as well as the Fury, which is a short course truck, also from ARRMA. And they both share the same design of chassis. In fact, this chassis right here is the exact same one as on the Raider buggy. Twin vertical plate design with aluminum plates along the side keeps it all narrow and very sturdy and very firm in the middle. It doesn't flex. Up front, the suspension is pretty traditional. You've got basically dual wishbone suspension with plastic-bodied shocks that are oil-filled and use coil springs. Front camber and toe are both adjustable, but you only have two options for shock mounts. Though the chassis is pretty compact, these wheels and tires are not. The wheels are 3 inches in diameter and the tires are 5 inches in diameter. They do have actual foam inserts in them, and the tire compound is pretty soft and malleable. At the rear, again, you've got H-arms with a camber link up top that is adjustable. You have just two options for shock mounting, same sort of shocks at the rear. It does have metal dog bones. All of the transmission gears are metal also. It has a gear diff inside of it. It's sealed, so you can actually change silicone oil inside of it. The truck also has an externally adjustable single-disc slipper clutch. Power comes from a 15-turn brushed motor, and it has a plastic guard to protect against impacts. The ESC is a brushed-only unit, and it is fully sealed, fully waterproof, as is this very large receiver box, which has a comically small receiver inside of it. Unfortunately, the servo is not waterproof. With the ESC and receiver box on top of this narrow chassis, the battery loads from the bottom. There's a single body clip that you pull out, then there is this plastic pin, and if you can get your finger in there just right, the battery door will swing open on a hinge. Now, this will fit a 6-cell nickel metal hydride pack, or you can put in a standard sized, even hard case 7.4 volt LiPo, and the ESC does have a LiPo cutoff mode. It can be a little bit of a tight fit in there though. The transmitter that ARRMA uses on all of its vehicles is a 2.4 gigahertz unit, and it's pretty unique in design in the industry. The grip feels good, but the steering wheel is kind of far away from your trigger hand. It uses just 4 AA's that mount in from the bottom here. It has digital trims for both channels, and it also has dual rate via this knob right here. But the most memorable feature of this controller is the fact that you can switch it over for left-handed use very, very easily. Now, right out of the box, without any motor break-in, using just a regular 2-cell LiPo pack, the Granite topped out at about 25 miles per hour on flat ground for me. With the motor broken in, you might be able to squeeze another 1, maybe 1.5, upwards of 2 out of that, maybe. For a ready-to-run, brushed off-roader, that's about as good as you're going to get. Now, one thing that was an immediate letdown for me when I took it over to some dirt was the quality of the tires. They sure felt good to my hands on the bench, but they're just a little bit too big and kind of spread the load out too much and end up giving you not so much rear traction. I definitely expected better. On loose surfaces, you'll need to learn how to counter steer and also steer with your throttle finger. Handling on the dirt was pretty decent. The shocks are set up pretty well right out of the box. I'd say they a little bit lean towards better stability on finer surfaces and for staying at higher speed than going on rougher terrain like this. Most people end up driving their off-road vehicles on terrain that's just not this bumpy. And the shock oil definitely seemed like it was well matched to the springs. For something that looks like a monster truck, the Granite has a nice low center of gravity, and I could definitely feel that when I was driving it. It didn't like to flip a lot. Now, that's not to say that it won't traction roll sometimes, but it was definitely doing much better than what I'm used to for this style of vehicle. Speaking of style of vehicle, this style is definitely not designed to do well on a prepared racetrack, but I tried it there anyway. And, well, it worked pretty well. The low center of gravity really comes in handy when you're driving around a track. And again, the suspension settings felt pretty well balanced. It also has a pretty good ratio of wheelbase to track. It had good stability in the air and on the ground. On this higher traction surface, I was able to discover a couple of other little shortcomings of the ARRMA Granite. First of all, the steering is kind of weak. It's the Servo. It's the same Servo that they use in their little buggy, which has much, much smaller wheels than this, and it's just overpowered by those large wheels on the Granite. I could both feel and see it struggling to turn those big meats. The Servo's speed is a little bit sluggish, but it's mostly the torque that's holding it back here. The other thing that I had trouble with was braking power. This vehicle does not have much of it. I tried recalibrating the ESC to the transmitter to make sure that I was getting my full throw from the reverse trigger input. I also gave it full drag brake that you can program in on the ESC. Still, braking just was not good. You really have to plan your slowdown in advance, and it almost feels like you're just kind of rolling to a stop. I felt this a little bit with the other ARRMA vehicles that I tested in the past, but with these big monster truck tires, it was just amplified quite a lot. Even with all of those things working against the ARRMA Granite though, it still managed to get around the track pretty well, and I ended the session with a smile on my face. I was so satisfied, in fact, that I decided that I wanted to break the ARRMA Granite into 1,000,000 pieces. And for that, I had just the thing. Through all of that punishment, one thing consistently failed. A ball end. With full throttle hits at a 45-degree angle directly into a wooden wall, the ball end just popped off and I was able to pop it back on. There was one exception, and that was this. And it was just a freak accident. I hit a rock when I was out in the open field just driving around, and the short turnbuckle that comes off the steering servo just separated. It was actually screwed in a little bit different amount on one side than the other. You can see it's also very short, so there's not a lot of thread there. That was an area of a little bit of concern, but it only happened once. Now overall, I'd say the ARRMA Granite stood up pretty well on its own. But for purposes of a review and considering whether I would actually recommend it to someone else, I had to look at the competition. One of the alternatives that came to mind was the ECX Ruckus. It's also a two-wheel drive from a relatively lesser-known brand. It has similar part support, in other words, not a lot of upgrades, if any. Does come with all the batteries included, although it's just a nickel metal hydride pack included. But that one has a 27 megahertz radio, it has a higher center of gravity, has a slower motor, and the transmission is really not brushless ready. It costs a lot less though, so for value I'd say it's pretty much a dead heat. Then I had to consider the Traxxas Stampede two-wheel drive, the king of two-wheel drive electric monster trucks for the past decade and a half or more. That one costs about the same as the Granite, although again it does come with a battery. Still slower with the stock setup, and the Stampede, the brushed edition, comes with a 27 MHz AM radio. Stampede has a higher center of gravity, its suspension is not set up as well out of the box, and it has even worse tires than this. Stampede does have a stronger steering servo, and it is waterproof. On paper, again, very, very close in value. For this review, I did drive a Traxxas Stampede two-wheel drive, box stock, all the same places, and I definitely had to give the edge in performance and just overall driving experience to the ARRMA Granite. Overall, it's a tough call. The Stampede has great part support, including aftermarket support. The Granite does not. All told, the ARRMA Granite seems to give good performance at the right price point. I'm definitely not ready to say it's the best deal in two-wheel drive monster trucks, but it's right up there. It's fast enough for what it is, it handles pretty well, and it's definitely durable. Just make sure that if you're only going to upgrade one thing on the ARRMA Granite, pick the servo. Fair warning though, it's 28 screws to change that thing. Well, that's all that I have to say about the ARRMA Granite two-wheel drive monster truck. Thank you very much for watching. As always, if you have any questions or comments, please be sure to post them up on the friendly forums at ultimaterc.com. And I'll be talking to you again soon in the next video. Bye for now.